There we go. All right. So, just to fill in folks on Zoom, I was just saying the copier gave me headaches this morning, but I do have your exams ready. Do remember you have to come pick that up in person. So if you're able to get here by class, let me know. And if not, we can figure out a time for you to pick it up later today. So again, just a couple slides left. And then I'll pass out your exam, and then you can either take it and start working on it whenever, or you can stay here, look it through, ask questions. So, and again, it's been 3+ years of the pandemic. I should have learned I cannot talk and click at the same time. There we go. Alrighty. All right, so we had been talking about journal articles, right? And we've been talking about the fact that the editors, the authors, right, especially in mainstream journals, tend to be pretty darn white, right? And this particular one didn't look at, wow, I'm blanking on the word. They didn't look at gender, but I would guess that they're largely pretty darn male too, although that is changing within the field. So how diverse is psychology in general? Well, this is from a recent study that the APA did, where they looked at just demographics. And so you can see, again, as I mentioned, gender disparity, and then we can also see age is pretty well distributed. And race pretty darn white. So I'm going to click on this link just so that we can see this with all the little things. And it's they've actually updated it, so they have through 2021 now. So actually more psychologists, or more of the workforce, are female now, which is great. And tracks with you look around this room, right? And if you looked around my grad school room, that would have actually also tracked as well. It's really interesting. So I didn't even know this until I was almost done with my PhD, but there's one other person in my family who has a PhD and it's also in clinical psych. So take that as you will. And he told my dad that when he was in grad school in the 1970s, his class was 9 men and 1 woman. And then when I was in grad school in the early 2000s, my class was 9 women and 2 men. So it has totally flip-flopped. But with that has come some unfortunate consequences. As women become more predominant within certain fields, what happens is they are that field is called feminized, which means that's a woman's profession now, so we're gonna pay you less, we're not gonna value your work as much. Which is dumb. Like, I don't have a better, more intelligent word for it, but it does happen within many fields as well. You see this within the medical profession, or fields that are very women heavy, like pediatrics or OBGYN, are not as respected as fields like surgery, where it does tend to be more male. If you look at the race and ethnicity, again, not great. You know, under 1% people who are indigenous, about 3% Asian, 5% African American, 8% Hispanic. You know, again, under 0.1% Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. Anyone who's mixed race or falls into another group, under 3%. And then the workforce is still 80% white, right? And this is a problem for a whole bunch of reasons. One, we just need diversity of thought within our field, right? The other is, to be perfectly honest, a lot of people, and we have psychological research to back this up, not only vibe better with a therapist who looks like them, talks like them, interacts like them, but even if we're looking at something like an assessment, let's say a kid is getting assessed for an intelligence test for see if they're make a gifted program. There's actually data showing that if that kid is a Black kid and they have a Black examiner, a Black therapist giving it to them, they do better. even if the exact same instructions are given in the exact same tone. So we need a more diverse workforce. You can see it sort of broken down by gender here and age. You'll see again, a lot more women in sort of the younger ages, which makes sense with what we're talking about. Disability status, not many who identify as having disability. 94% are identifying as at least temporarily able-bodied. But our mean age is still 49-ish. You know, not great if we want to keep treating people, right? And you can look back with this data set back to 2011 and see, like, have things changed? Yeah. So like gender has changed, race really hasn't changed that much. We do have more Hispanic folks now. But disability status, things like that. The other thing that's not really tracked here is people who are sexual and gender minorities. So, for example, we have a VWU grad who just finished his first year of counseling grad school, and I wrote him a letter of rec, and he and I were trying to look and find statistics about how many trans individuals are therapists. And it's really hard to find the statistics, but they're, that maybe not surprisingly to y'all, like the percentage of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander folks, that's very, very small. And again, we know that not only do people who are trans or non-binary struggle with gender dysphoria at times, but in fact, to undergo any sort of gender affirming treatment, whether that's taking hormones, whether that's getting surgery, you actually have to be evaluated by a psychologist or some sort of therapist. So how much better would it be if we have people who've actually been through it themselves? So we have a long way to go as a field to be more welcoming, to be more inclusive, to be more accessible. I think accessibility is one of the big issues. Top PhD programs will pay for your tuition and give you a stipend to work for the department. Anything beyond that, master's programs, PsyD programs, some PhD programs who don't have as much funding, you are paying for tuition, so you're taking giant loans, right? You are typically living in a city other than where your family is. There's a lot of barriers to entry that we need to think about in terms of how do we get more people who can help us to diversify the field. And this was where they looked at subspecialty. So they looked at within each of the like major subspecialties. You certainly can break it down more at this. What does the race breakdown look like? And so you'll see again, largely majority white still, but there are some subfields where we're starting to see some gains. So counseling is only 49% white now. So we're seeing a lot more students of color choosing to go into counseling psychology. Counseling versus clinical tends to be sort of more holistic. It incorporates more culturally sensitive perspectives. So I think it appeals more to folks than like the very scientifically based clinical psychology. Not that counseling doesn't have that behind it. IO, again, we're seeing more. Side note, if you want to make a lot of money in psychology, IO is what you go into because you're paid by like Fortune 500 companies instead of, you know, an academic nonprofit like I am, you know. And again, I don't want you guys to think I'm poor, but certainly I could make a lot more money if I were an IO psych. I could probably make 2 to 3 times what I make right now. But you see some of the what they call like harder or more natural sciencey psych subfields are in fact very much still white. So things like natural neuroscience. Biopsych isn't its own thing on here, but experimental is, and that's where that falls, right? I think it's interesting that school psych is still really super white, just because anecdotally talking to my students, a lot of them are really interested in going into school psych. Maybe that just means we're seeing a new sea of change there. But yeah, so these are things to be thinking about. These are things to be pondering. You know, and if any of you are thinking grad school, you know, one of the things you need to be asking, to be perfectly honest, because part of grad school is also you interviewing the program, is, you know, what is life like here for people who look like me, right? Talking to other students, things like that. We can look at gender data real quick here too. And so you see, this is new that they're actually reporting folks who are outside the gender binary, so that's great. But as you can see, not giant percentages. And again, women are now dominating. Women are very interested in what we often call the helping professions like psychology, but also just women in general are going to college more. So for example, the majority of our bio majors here are women. You can look at by location. So this is location within their university. So is it within a med school? Is it within a school of education? Is it a arts and sciences type program? And again, you see sort of the more harder sciences, we see more white folks dominating. And again, just women be psychologying, which is awesome. And again, this is by degree level. So doctoral degrees would be any of your Ds, right? Your PhD, your EdD. So if you get a degree in counseling psych or school psych, it's often in a school of education, and you'll get an education doctorate, a doctor of education. And then there's a professional degree you can get as well called the PsyD. And that is a clinical doctorate, but without as much scientific training. And gender wise, we do see, you know, again, majority women, even more so at the master's degree level. So again, just things to be thinking about our field and how you all can contribute it in the future. Alrighty, so thanks for hanging with me through those 2 slides. Again, I just wanted to give you the full mode for everything. And I'm going to go ahead and end the Zoom since that is the last thing we're going to be doing.